Wait. I heard a rumor that both of you guys are thirsty. Is that true?
Oh, well, I'm thirsty for a different reason than Elliot is. Let me just say that first and foremost. I'm not that dirty, but I'm thirsty because of these allergies. These spring has sprung and my throat is scratchy.
And
Elliot, why are you thirsty?
I've been extra thirsty because I realize so much now that on days when I have to do more talking, which I'm not used to in the midst of COVID, I'm parched. I am parched. And so, yes, I've been relying on lozenges, but also I've been drinking can.
That's with 2 N's.
What a good recipe.
And if you go to their website, drinkcan.com, and you enter the promo code WORSE, you will get 25% off your order. Can is obviously a delicious THC-infused beverage, 2% THC with a little bit of CBD is in there as well.
Low cal,
life-changing, low cal.
Excuse me while I go there right now and enter can.
Yeah, right. That's can with 2 N's, drinkcan.com. Check it out and use the promo code WORSE for 25% off.
I knew these acrylics would come in handy someday.
Welcome to You're Making It Worse. I'm Elliot Glazer.
I'm Brent Sullivan.
And I'm H. Alan Scott.
We're here. We're queer.
Meh.
Textual healing.
Well, if you read Yahoo News as regularly as
Yahoo News?
Yeah, it's Yahoo is where I have my trashy email account. Whenever I sign up for anything online, I use that Yahoo account.
Yeah.
And everything. So I go there a couple times a day, and they curate their feed well. But the bad news from this week was that there has been a flurry of anti-trans legislation recently, most notably targeted at trans children. But in North Carolina seems to be sort of leading the crazy pack. According to an article I read, Republicans there proposed Senate Bill 514, which would ban people under the age of 21 from getting transition health care they need and require state employees to out trans and queer children to their parents.
Jesus.
So if a child displays symptoms of gender dysphoria, gender nonconformity, or otherwise demonstrates a desire to be treated in a manner incongruent with the minor's sex, they must notify the child's parents or guardians. The legislation mandates. Before we get totally in the weeds, there is a Democratic governor in the state of North Carolina who is seen as unlikely to sign a bill like this.
Are the House and Senate Republican though? I think they are.
They are. I don't think that they're strongly Republican enough to override a veto. But this was the case. It's actually kind of interesting. A couple other states have passed some similar legislation, and there have been several. To give credit, I think where credit is due, there have been several Republican governors that have vetoed some of the more extreme examples of anti-trans legislation that's been passed in Arkansas and South Dakota. Although, to be fair, in South Dakota, for instance, the governor passed an executive order banning trans girls from women's sports, and in Arkansas, the legislature overrode the veto from the governor. But there have been some Republican governors that have vetoed these sort of really draconian anti-trans bills. I think it's particularly nefarious because it's targeted towards children.
Kids. Yeah, it's so creepy. This flurry of activities that have been happening, especially the Arkansas one, like really chilled me to the bone reading about it. Just the idea of Republican governors trying to veto it because it's just so inherently cruel. But I think the thing that just throws me about it is the idea that adult people are so focused on children and their growing understanding of themselves. Like that should be you should be the most compassionate toward that kind of thing.
Yeah.
And this bizarre need to focus on it feels so
that's what blows me away.
Strangely cumulative.
The idea that, I mean, I am it's gross. I was texting with a friend who is trans, and I asked her about sort of, because to me it doesn't feel new. I'm sure there's a flurry of these new bills that are getting attention online, but I'm like, this feels like it's a constant threat. There's a constant threat of people who are anti-trans, largely conservative people who are anti-trans, who will go out of their way to make a point about family values or make a point about their conservatism, and they will use trans bodies at the cost to prove their point with zero idea of the ramifications and they don't care. They don't give a fuck. The trans bathrooms issue that was a big deal a couple years ago. It was, and it continues to be a big deal. And those things become sort of like ways for conservatives just to get news articles written about them and to get attention, rather than actually being a thing that is needed or warranted or that they firmly believe in. And so they use their bodies at that. And to me, like the kids part, I'm thinking like doctors who have studied, who've actually worked with trans kids and studied trans kids, have found that the traumatic impact that puberty has on a trans child is lifetime scarring, not only physically but also mentally. And the idea that if a child is clearly showing signs and is taken to medical care that is affirming and inclusive and understands the idea of gender dysphoria and all the things wrapped around gender, and can guide that child through the process of transitioning into their full selves, then they should be allowed that, because science has proven that they can access that adequately. It's blows me away.
It's such a strange thing that you would legislate what a private citizen, what conversation a private citizen can have with their medical professionals in a like it's like
regardless of the age,
regardless of the age. Like, you know, I obviously, you know, believe on the liberal end of things when it comes to bathroom rights as well, but I can understand that they think that impacts more people who aren't related to the trans community. But I can't rationalize any reason why a legislator would say these children shouldn't have these conversations with their doctors or without their parents finding or whatever. It just seems,
well, because to them, I mean, to maybe understand the conservative point of view, to them it's all connected. So if you stop a child from being able to transition at youth, right, and let's say that child stops transitioning starts the transition process to being a woman or to identifying as a woman. And then that female child wants to go out for the soccer team, the girls' soccer team at school. And then that becomes this sort of oddly case of, you know, oh, well, that child has an unfair advantage because of their genetic infrastructure and how they work as a human being. And so it becomes this domino effect of like, oh, well, clearly this is a danger then. And it's all connected for them. It's not just this one isolated thing.
For sure. I also think another thing that I think gets lost a lot, and I don't hear this sentiment expressed frequently, but I've certainly seen it online, especially among sort of like right-leaning folks, is I've always wondered, like, where does their resistance to trans people come from?
Right.
Is it an insistence on certain gender norms or whatever? And I always forget, and I've heard this before, like I said, that there's also connected with it, which is the idea that God doesn't make mistakes, and that if someone is trans, and they're, you know, obviously they're dealing with that, then there's an implication supposedly that God has made a mistake, and God gave this person a sense of self, which is male, and perhaps, you know, a female, genitalia, I guess. And that's something that I kind of lose track a lot, which is like, it all kind of relates, it all boils back down to God, you know?
Sky Daddy.
With them, you know, right, Sky Daddy.
Just so gross, because that shouldn't be a part of a political conversation.
I mean, of course not.
The thing that creeps me out so much from this article, too, is that they say the bill is broad and could affect tomboys and trans kids alike, meaning that girls who tend to be more boyish, and then trans kids who are figuring out their gender identity could both be like, it's such a fucking shit show. Yeah. And the idea that either groups are being equated and that they would both get punished for who they are. Again, these are children.
Well, but it's a stunt. It's like the sodomy laws that once plagued the United States, that oftentimes, and I'm not saying that this law wouldn't be enforced, but this is a stunt law. This isn't a law to be enforced. There's very little way that you could even enforce this law, especially if a medical practitioner or medical doctor is saying, denying services to a patient in front of them. Like a doctor who is well researched and is doing what they've committed to do in their profession, then they wouldn't deny that person service or wouldn't deny that patient service. It's these non-doctors out there that are putting these stunt laws out there that can't be enforced, like the sodomy laws, where they existed just to pinpoint and sometimes use against people if it benefited them, just to terrorize people.
Yeah,
and it's disgusting.
Yeah, it is. It is unfortunate.
Well, fuck them. I say they can all go. I'm church, not Church's Chicken. What's the chicken place? What's the place you love?
Church's Chicken.
No, not Church's. Chick-fil-A. They can all go stay at Chick-fil-A.
Well, I'm sure there are plenty of those in Arkansas.
There are. There are.
Not even joking.
We have, I think probably for the first time we can say this, an award-winning journalist.
Oh.
Like legitimately, not one of those fake awards either, like a real award. Like he was on Out 100. He also won the GLAAD Award for Best Blog and you also wrote a memoir called A Place Like This. I mean, you're probably one of the more accomplished guests we've ever had. And I'm excited to announce Mark S. King.
Hey, Mark.
Hi, everybody.
Hi.
It makes me wonder about the general quality of who you're having on the show. I should have done more research, perhaps.
Well, the people who win our awards are like, they were voted in a Queerty poll. You know what I mean? Like,
right. Or maybe it was a porn award.
Yeah. I mean, we haven't had that, but I mean, that's the same par as the Queerty.
It's the AVN, right? The Adult Video News.
That's right.
Okay.
Yeah.
But
Ellie, you live blog for them, I think, as I recall. But anyway, go ahead, Alan.
Your blog won the GLAAD Award for Best Blog, right? My Fabulous Disease.
After 5 nominations.
Oh,
I'm the
nice.
Susan Lucci of the GLAAD Awards.
Yeah.
Many of you over 40, which I guess none of you are, but nevertheless, yes.
Wait, but so I guess give us like a sort of just a very basic summary of like the blog and what it talks about and what is.
I've been writing all my life since I was 24 years old, and I tested HIV positive, which was 1985 in West Hollywood in the center of the epidemic. So I've been writing about living with HIV ever since. And I think where I found my voice or my niche was talking about it with a sense of humor. I mean, that's always been around. One of the first newsletters for people with HIV was called Diseased Pariah News. So we've always been a little, kind of giggling through the graveyard sort of humor and among people living with HIV. And I just decided to go with it and claim my joy and not let HIV take it from me. And so it's my fabulous disease, because if this disease is going to live in my body, it's going to take on my characteristics, and I'm fabulous.
And you get to own it. I mean, I think that's sort of like that's the beauty of if you are someone with HIV, you get to treat it however you want, and you can't be canceled for being flippant or making light or whatever of a situation, because that's your experience. It's as authentic as it gets. I think that's great.
And you know what? That's a very nice way to put it, and I exploit the hell out of that every single day. In other words, oh my God, he said that. Well, but he's living with HIV, so it's okay.
Right.
You can say it.
Well,
I'm part of a minority. Like you can't talk about us, but I can.
When we first started emailing, arranging the scheduling of you being here today, of course, you've done a lot of serious work and a lot of serious writing, and you're definitely a very accomplished writer. But in your email to us, just to start off on maybe a lighter note, you said that you had slept with Rock Hudson, which I particularly am very interested in knowing about. If you could tell us that story.
Okay, well, first of all, Alan, I'm impressed that you know who he is.
Of course I know who he is.
Rock Hudson,
Well, let me tell you, as the years have gone by, as the decades have gone by, it's no fun telling a star fucking story when no one knows who the star is, and you have to explain. It's like explaining.
Remember that time I slept with Ernest Borgnine?
He did movies with Elizabeth Taylor, so it's like, But anyway, so I'm glad that you asked, and I threw it out there in the email because I had a feeling that y'all were a little cheeky and might appreciate a good story.
Please.
And, it was the very early 80s in Los Angeles, and I was out to dinner with my boyfriend. It was our anniversary. And this very low pear-shaped tones came from a table behind me, and it was Mr. Rock Hudson speaking to us. As I would later learn, if you were young and blonde, as I was at that time, and had not slept with Rock Hudson, that was the real story. That would have been
right.
So anyway, we talked, we drank. He came home with us. And it was our anniversary, and it was really great. And we played Trivial Pursuit, and he drank all my scotch. And then he says, I say at one point, this was my big move. I said, would you like me to roll a joint? And he says, oh, well, I better not do that because, that would make me really horny. And I'm like rolling a joint faster than you can,
right.
And
how fast can I go?
Yes, I know. And I don't know, bibbity bobbity boo, half an hour later, he's taking a shower in my very rusty bathtub. And this was all a great story. And it was great to tell my friends the next day. I told my parents. I didn't tell them.
Right.
Oh my God.
About Trivial Pursuit and all of that.
Yeah.
And then the next thing, he's all over the news because he's got AIDS, and it's really awful, and it's bursting through the news and cycle. And I'm now watching every night on the news, Rock Hudson died this slow, awful death. All of the emergency treatments and the flights to Paris, and Rock Hudson is getting an emergency transfusion in Paris. And he was the first person I'd ever met who'd I'd slept with, who had AIDS. I'm the first person. People say, "Oh, are you saying that you got Rock Hudson?" No, I'm not saying that I'm carrying Mr. Hudson's viral load. No, I'm saying that I slept with a lot of people, he being one of them. And it ruined a perfectly good story.
Right.
Story.
That fucking pandemic really ruined
that damn
the fun of having sex with a movie star.
Well, Mark, you were diagnosed in, like you said, in 1985. And just to give, because like you said, we are younger, and there are many listeners who are also much younger. And I don't think a lot of them understand or maybe are familiar with the timeline of HIV AIDS. And like testing had just recently become publicly available in the mid 80s. And correct me if I'm wrong, but like HIV wasn't even like, that was 87 that came about, right? It was AIDS up until then.
We didn't even know people started dying in the early 80s. And I lived in West Hollywood, and I mean, like, people started dying. Like, you were starting to miss bartenders. And, the cute teller at your bank disappeared over the weekend because he was dead, And so it was a graveyard, and it was terrible and awful and hard to comprehend, like, how bad this will get, or will it get that bad? And we kept kind of living in denial, like, well, maybe it's not, maybe it's really sleazy people. Like, I wasn't at the baths every weekend, but anyway, then they figured out what the virus was in 84, and in 85 they had a test for it, and you weren't supposed to take the test. It was, get this, it was politically incorrect to take the test. Why? Don't get tested, all the activists said.
Amongst gay people?
Yes.
Why?
Yes, gay activists said, do not take the test, because the government will then know, and they'll mark you, and maybe they'll put a tattoo on you. They were talking about sending us off to, they were going to quarantine us to an island somewhere. I mean, they were literally discussing this in Congress.
With the Japanese American internment camps.
Oh, almost. Exactly. Yeah. I said, if they give us Maui, we'll go. So this was all going on, and the test came out in March of 85, and I took it right away because it's like, hey, I want to know if I'll be dead in 2 years. I would like to make some plans. I'd like to know. And I took it, and I was positive, and I thought, okay, there you go. I'm a goner. And the short story is, it didn't happen. I didn't get sick. I didn't die. I just kept going, and I started working for AIDS organizations and just doing all this stuff. And I saw the very best of people, and I saw us all have a response and band together and fight this thing. And
that's great.
It was horrible, and it was wonderful, and it was beautiful. It's like war,
Let me ask you a question, as someone who obviously isn't completely versed in HIV, everything related to it, and the science and everything. The fact that you were diagnosed in 1985, like, is there something were you a part of, like, early treatments or programs that provided you sort of a better outlook on the disease, or did you in a certain sense get lucky? Like, do you know?
Well, first of all, I am very lucky, and so the reason why I'm kind of giddy, just in general, is because I'm just happy to be walking and talking. So I mean, like I'm totally grateful. So that's my baseline. But to answer your question, yeah, there are people like me who were called long-term non-progressors. We just never got real bad. And there is a reason for it. It's a long scientific explanation I won't bore you with, but basically I kind of have a mutation in my body that resists the HIV getting too bad. And those things exist amongst a small group of people. But I had to wait for years before the first drug was approved. I had to wait, and then it was one drug, and then a couple of years later it was the next drug, and
they're all probably hard to get, right?
Oh, well, they were available once they got FDA approval, thanks to AIDS activists beating down the doors of the FDA. But and that, all this accelerated access, the reason why we got a COVID vaccine, our treatments for COVID so quickly, is because the FDA runs on guidelines that were put into place because of AIDS activism in the 80s, when we said, we want drugs and we want them now. Now speed this shit up. And they did, working actually with a guy named Anthony Fauci. Back in the day, he was in charge of how AIDS drugs were approved. And so
that's why I'm attracted to him. I knew there was, since the beginning of the pandemic, I was like, he's hot for a reason.
I remember when
he became our ally. He was kind of our enemy at first, but then he came around and helped us work to make drugs approved more quickly.
There was that documentary, I forget, it's like How to Beat a Plague.
How to Survive a Plague.
How to Survive a Plague. And I remember watching that years ago and just being so affected by it. And very clearly at the beginning of the pandemic, I was like, oh my God, that's the dude from the documentary. Like, I remembered him so clearly because he's so small and he has that gravelly voice, and it's just just to put it together. And I was like, he kind of saved, I mean, I can't say it, but a lot of people would say that he, became the ultimate ally for the gay community by helping save everyone and pushing for the drugs. And I'm like, I hope he gets to do it this time again too. But obviously Trump made it as hard as possible.
Yeah, right. Tony Fauci became an ally. He became, and he was smart enough to know that the people who were fighting for those things were smart too. And they wanted the right things, and they didn't want to do anything stupid. They just wanted drugs faster. That's all.
Yeah.
Did you feel a sort of a shadow once COVID approached? Did you feel like you had?
That's funny. It's really, it's funny you should ask that, because when COVID was starting, and all this attention, and suddenly Congress is doing all of these things, and everybody's alarmed because their grandmother might die. As opposed to like the black trans drug addict that was dying of AIDS, or the homosexual, right? In other words, I couldn't help but, first of all, feel pissed off. Like, please stop, geez, if only, they had paid attention to AIDS like that. So there was that resentment, but I can't live there, because what was also familiar was this sense, like you say, a shadow. It was a sense of, how bad will this get? Because I remember being there, and trauma is cumulative, you don't forget. And I remember, and I hadn't thought about it in years. And so that's a great question, Elliot. It was like, in 1984, going, how bad will this get? Oh shit, it's getting really bad. And then suddenly everybody started to rock.
I want to say, just before that your book, A Place Like This, chronicles a lot of that period of the HIV/AIDS virus and your experience in the 80s in Los Angeles, and
plus a lot of sex and drugs and phone sex. Because I know phone sex company.
Oh wow, really?
Yes, I did.
Well, I mean, I had a friend, I worked under a guy a few years ago who is in his 50s now, and he said that once AIDS, the epidemic, began, he basically went celibate for. He said he was like almost celibate for almost 10 years.
So or he might have been calling me.
That's what I mean. I mean, I wonder if phone sex, or there were different outlets or ways to.
Well, back in the day, boys and girls, before there was a Grindr, before there was the internet, before there was AOL, There were before there were chat lines, there was a phone, an 800 number you would call, and you'd use a credit card and order what kind of man you wanted to talk to. And then a few minutes later, a guy called back and he talked something like this, and he would be your fantasy man. Wow. And he would talk to you for about 13 minutes is the average phone call. And we made $45 a call for those things.
Wow.
$45.
And I made more money. I made my Coke dealer.
The Reagan era, guys.
And,
I think Elliot still calls them, but yeah.
It was an amazing, it was, I'll put it this way. I learned a lot about how gay men tick and what they think about when nobody else is listening. Yeah. And the name of the company was Telerotic. Our slogan was, "Our men know you like the palm of your hand."
Well, you also, you kind of went a couple years ago. I remember this story. I just recently connected it, that it was you, but that you wrote somewhere that you had slept with 10,000 people. No, that went, of course, out of hand. I know. And I'm sure people remember this story. So if you could tell me how in the world you slept with 10,000 people.
Huffington Post had a podcast series about called D is for Desire. It was about sex in all of its forms. And I was the promiscuous gay guy they interviewed. And it's really simple math, y'all. If you go to the baths and have, a busy night at the baths, you have 10 or 20 encounters. And by that, I mean, some tab A is going to touch tab B, slot B. Of some sort. There's going to be some encounter. Well, you do that a few times a week, and you do that for a few years. And bibbity bobbity boo, 10 years later, you've touched, sucked, or played with 10,000 guys. It really adds up.
I do like how bibbity bobbity boop generally means touched, sucked, and fucked, but then in this instance,
it's so funny to me because the idea of 10,000 sleeping with 10,000, I don't even want to go to brunch with friends sometimes, let alone sleep with 10,000 people. That to me is just astounding.
Did it feel like I guess there was did you feel a shift change in the way that are you referring to the baths as being something omnipresent from your life before and after AIDS became such a big?
Well, certainly before. Let's remember that right before AIDS happened was Gay Lib. We were at the tail end of the sexual liberation of straight society, and gay men were finally getting our turn at bat, and we were coming out, and we were on the cover of Time magazine, and it was like the gay, and this was after Stonewall. This was more like gay men were saying, "Wait a second, we're legit, and we're going to have a great time." And this was the San Francisco clone with the mustache and the shirt and the tight 501s.
The Village People.
And we were
Studio 54 era.
We couldn't keep our hands off of each other. And we were, it was a political statement, and it was a statement of freedom to finally be it. Y'all may be used to it. You may be used to the certain freedoms and sexual environment you get to paddle around in. We weren't. We were like, oh my God, this is great. What a playland. And so we were just tumbling all over each other having sex because we were so grateful. We suddenly we felt okay about doing it. So I'm just saying that there was a more heightened sense of let's get it while the getting's good because this feels great. Yeah. And then of course, as Donna Summer sings, the lights dimmed.
Yeah.
Let me ask you, what was it like to be, you said you were in West Hollywood in 1985 when you were diagnosed. Yes. What was it like to be in a gay neighborhood as really the early stages of this pandemic unfurled and very quickly, like Elliot said, I've met also people who said they were basically celibate for 7-10 years. What was it like going to bars, meeting people? All of a sudden, was there a freeze over social interactions, or was it as freewheeling as it always was? Yeah.
Oh no, it was definitely put a damper on things because I moved to West Hollywood straight out of college in 1980. I was 19. I wasn't old enough to drink in the bars when I moved to. I got in anyway, and so it was. The contrast between walking down the street in West Hollywood in your little hot pants and your tank top and cruising men on the street, because we had to do it the old-fashioned way, and following them home. However we did it. And let me tell you, the lost art of cruising. Oh my God, I wish y'all. I wish there could be a class in that or something, because you're really missing out when you just flip by people because you judge them, or you delete them or flip by them for one small question they answered wrong. And then you flip by them. You don't know what you missed out on. I got to see that person and smell them and taste them before I made any big choices about whether or not I was.
Yes-anded to Rock Hudson. I mean, that's an example there to say yes to a cruise.
So, but to answer your question, yes, it was all of those things. And it was this magical kind of Disneyland. And then when that happened, yes, absolutely, but this is also what happened. Yes, the bars emptied out. The bathhouses were,
shut down.
Persona non grata. You did not do that anymore, I mean, when it really set in and we knew what we were dealing with. And, but what happened instead is we abandoned the Sunday tea dances for town halls. And we were all at the town halls and we were all learning as much as we could. And everybody was caring for somebody. If you had a guest room in West Hollywood, somebody had died in it. Maybe more than one. 3 died in my guest room, including my best friend. And so we were all, and I'll tell you, it's horrible. It makes you think very fast about what life's big questions are. I'm 24 years old in 1985 when I test positive. My best friends are dying. Everybody's dying around me. And suddenly you have to think, what is it all about? Why are we here? What does it all mean? Who is God? I mean, all this stuff, it's like, you better figure it out quick because and also, so that's what it was like.
I think a lot of people don't, connect the reason why here in Los Angeles, West Hollywood is its own incorporated city. And the roots of why it incorporated wasn't necessarily money. It was because of the Los Angeles city's response to people dying of the epidemic in the 80s. There wasn't an active response from the government. So West Hollywood decided to make their own government and do their own
thing. That is true. And that happened while I lived there. And you're absolutely right.
It's a fascinating sort of response, civic response.
I just, oh, go ahead. Sorry. Oh, all right. No. I just, my bad. I just looked up the inflation rate for, you said on average, you got $45 per call to your sex line.
That's right.
So in 1990, $45 now would be $90.
Wow.
That's really a phenomenal feat. And I won't join an OnlyFans for more than $6. So I really think that's an impressive feat.
You get to enjoy these new technologies. We got calls from people in Ohio who had never talked to a real live gay guy before, but they wanted to desperately, and that's, you're right. It was very profitable.
Voices are sexier, really sexy too. Like I used to work for Kaplan. I was in basically telemarketing, sales and stuff way back in the day. And I always found people's voices more appealing than after I would look them up on Facebook. Back in the day, you could find anyone on Facebook, and I would talk to someone. I'm like, oh, he's cute, and look him up. I'm like, no, he's not. But that happened over and over again. Voices are very, I feel very appealing.
Think of the intimacy of the phone. Yeah. Here's this guy, he's at home, he's in bed, the lights are all off. And I'm not just talking about the sex, I'm talking about the intimacy of it.
Yeah.
Of just whispering in the phone, because maybe he's got family on the other side of the house, and he's whispering in the phone, and he's telling you his dark desires. And maybe it's somebody that I talked to a couple of times a week for years, which I did. And I saw these guys through breakups, through coming out, through disappointments, through gay bashings, all sorts of stuff, After our little sexy time, I'd say, how are you?
Yeah.
Now, the weird part of that is I had to keep up my persona. They couldn't know that I was this skinny red-haired guy, that was this total geek living in. Not that I am anymore. I know this is a radio show and people don't know what I look like, but I'm a very hot, ginger daddy now.
Right.
I'm 60, but I'm one of those hot ones.
Yeah.
But back then I was this skinny little redhead, and they couldn't know that, so I had to keep it up. So they told me all this personal, intimate stuff about themselves, and everything they got from me was a lie. And that just started screwing with me after a while.
Well, I kind of want to ask you about, one of the things that we've talked about before on the podcast is this sort of disassociation of the community, of the queer community in a lot of ways. And the way millennials and Gen Z sort of see older queer people in the community, they're sometimes not welcomed in certain spaces, or there's this sort of vibe of a separation between the older queer guys and the younger millennial spaces that are out there. And this is actually a listener, a good friend of mine. He wanted to ask this question, which I think is so important. Like, how do we sort of change the narrative on bonding between the older generation of queer men specifically who survived a plague with this sort of Gen Z millennial generation and what the lessons can be learned there? Because there does seem to be a divide.
Well, there is, and this is the way I look at it. You can't escape human nature. And as humans, we collect in groups.
Are you sure? Can we maybe though?
Yeah.
Because they make me nuts.
We do collect in groups. We do tend to form little cliques that way, and that's what we're comfortable with. And the other thing is that we all have to experience life on our own terms. We can't be defined by the lessons that the past generation wants to impart on us. And let me give you an example. When I was a kid, when I was in my early 20s, before AIDS came along, there were Vietnam vets on every corner, and they were wearing their camo and they were asking for dollars or whatever they were doing, right? I never once walked up to one of those guys and said, "Tell me all about it. Yeah. Tell me what happened. And here, let me hear the story." I couldn't care less. And then pretty soon I had my own war to worry about. People living today, guys who are in their 20s, their 30s, even their 40s, they got their own shit. We all got our own shit. And I'm not going to use my tragedy, my tragic history as a blunt instrument to club over young gay guys by saying, "Listen to this. This is what we went through. And we all died." You know, I want to share that history. I want to do it in a way that's accessible and lets them hear it in a way that, you know, that's why I try to be entertaining when I talk about this my history, because maybe some of it will get through and they'll want to know more. I'm happy to tell the story, but I'm not going to use it as a blunt instrument, because that is not what my friends who are dead would want me to do with their memory.
I think that's a great way to wrap up this interview, actually. That was perfect. Mark, it was so great. I'm so glad that you were an important guest for me to have on the podcast, for all of us, really, and to have that sort of your narrative that is like so different than what I think a lot of queer guys who listen to this podcast probably ever hear or seek out. And so I'm so glad that we were able to give that to them, but also that you were free and so open to be able to share your story. So thank you for being here.
Good for you. Congratulations for having me on.
Where can people find your blog, follow you on the internet, see all the gym selfies that you post? The best thing to do, my home base is myfabulousdisease.com. You are welcome to come visit anytime. You can reach me that way, read some things, watch my drag videos. You'll have a good time. Oh, I didn't know about the drag videos. That's exciting. I do drag as well. That's exciting.
Yeah. Oh, there you go.
There you go. Well, thank you, Mark, so much.
Thanks.
You're welcome.
And another thing.
So in this week's And Another Thing, I thought it would be fun to do something completely removed from LGBTQ stuff and talk about our dream homes. Now, a lot of friends...
You get one show on HGTV and you want to talk about dream homes?
I feel like I have a very, very small smattering of friends who have purchased homes or are looking for homes. And I'm certainly not in that bracket yet, but I do have, you know, very distinct ideas about what my dream homes will look like. So I can start, or I could
please Elliot,
start, because yours is like out of reach.
I love people if they know LA or California, there's a type of home called the Craftsman home, which is very popular in the Pasadena neighborhood, the east side of LA. Well, there's some of it in Venice too, but it's basically there's it in Hollywood. It's just a specific style of home that I like. I like that sort of next to a colonial, maybe like a mix of the two.
An open layout.
An open layout, something cozy, you know, it's got that, it feels old, but like the inside never, I like older, but I like clean. So I do not gravitate towards the like Palm Springs style, like bricks and boxes. I don't like those scare me. And I imagine like having kids and it being just so, I don't know, like so sanitary and artificial. So I like something, I want something that's a little bit Pasadena, a little craftsman-y, but it has to have a pool. There's no way I will live in a home without a pool. I can't imagine
pools are death traps,
buying buying real estate without a pool. And I need I want a mix of Pasadena. I want LA and I want Pasadena and I want east side and a pool. And basically what I want is, nobody will know this reference, but this show I used to watch, The Fosters, about
Right.
Terry Polo and another woman were a lesbian couple with like 1 million foster kids, and they lived in San Diego. And the opening to the show was like in close-ups of blankets and other blankets and pillows and stuff. And I was like, that's the home I want. I want that home.
Yeah.
So
what about Brent?
Yeah, well, when it comes, I mean, I think I've established this before, but when it comes to homes, I don't want them at all. You don't want a house at all? I don't want a house at all. I don't need a yard. I want to live in a big building. I want a balcony. I want to be able to watch things or people with my balcony. So I want to be able to drink and get drunk with cars going by. I like that.
My God.
Yeah. My current balcony, I have an interior view and I'm just looking at a wall. So I'm getting drunk at a wall. Like that's just not very exciting for me. But I also like the idea of a place small enough that like, if you're terrified that like someone broke in and is trying to murder you, all you have to do is like look in like 2 rooms and you're like, I'm good.
Talking about your dream house, not the place where you want to get murdered.
Literally, no, that's my motive too for my dream home. I mean, Brent and I are very similar in this respect.
Oh my God.
The idea of my mother has always said, don't buy a home. They're a waste of money. They're ridiculous. Like, sure, people say they're an investment in the future and everything, but the taxes and everything, and then you have to fix shit that goes wrong with it. And like, all this shit, it's just not worth it down the line, especially when you're like poor and you're 60 something. No, I can't take it. I want to live. I mean, like I said before, I am very aware of the murderer in every aspect of my life. And I'm conscious of like when it's going to come and how it's going to get me. And to me, I want that barrier of a doorman. I want that barrier of an elevator or of 5 flights of stairs they have to climb up. And if you're physically fit enough to climb 5 flights of stairs and then still murder me, then I had it coming.
You deserve it.
Who do you guys think is coming to murder you?
No, there's something creepy about houses. I felt that way since I was a kid, and I still even when I go back to even in my 30s, I go back to my parents' house, and I'm like terrified to be there alone at night.
Yes, but there's also something about, and I think maybe Brent and I also relate on this, about the appeal of a hotel. Do you know what I mean? The activity we love. It doesn't matter if it's a Ramada Inn or a Marriott. Like the idea of going into a hotel and having that space to yourself and just being able to do whatever the fuck you want.
I like that. I've always loved the idea of being where there is activity my entire life. Same. I like that, and so I love hotels. I love big buildings because you're like, there's people around. I hear humanity. When I get sick. It's, especially living alone, when you get sick and that's kind of isolating. I mean, just like cold, you get a cold or a flu or something. You're like, I can still hear humanity. And I feel like I'm amidst. And if I die in my studio, I'm like, they'll find me sooner rather than later. Right?
But my mom has always said that the type of vacationer you are is indicative of the type of home you own, which is true for me, because the idea of going to a remote place and just like casually living for a week is like, that's the worst vacation possible. I want to be in a big city. I want museums. I want access to shit. I want bars. I want
Mexico
stuff.
City.
Yes, Cuba. Anywhere in Cuba. Well, not anywhere, but like wherever the big city is in Cuba. Like I want the big cities. I want the big places. And I know, Elliot, you love going. You drive middle of nowhere just to like look at a tree.
7 hours just to take a hike. Yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
I don't want to live I do not want to live anywhere rural. I don't want to live anywhere that feels empty or anything.
But you want to live in a house that feels like that.
No, I want to live in a house where I know I'm like surrounded by other people, but I can still have peace and quiet and a hammock and a pool, and I can have people over and room for the dog to run. I basically want to live in a Nancy Meyers movie. And to that point, one of my good friends, Catherine, grew up in Pasadena, and her parents' house was scouted by Nancy Meyers. And they know full well that I would do anything to own a home like theirs.
Yeah. True. Nancy
beautiful.
That is a dream, but I want to have that in an apartment. I remember I saw
I'll have a hammock in the apartment.
The Diana Ross Brandy movie from the 80s where like she's separated at birth or whatever. And in her penthouse apartment, there were stairs. Like it was a 2-floor apartment. Yeah. And I just remember being blown away that an apartment could have that. And I was like, done. I'm going to live in a penthouse.
I know.
Done.
You want Carol Radziwill's apartment.
No, not well. Yeah, sure. I would take that. I would take any big.
A lot
apartment.
of deep cut references in this conversation.
No, that's not that deep a cut. But I would also enjoy, like in my wildest dreams, I own a home in LA and it's big and quiet and lovely and all that stuff. And then I have a pied a terre in New York.
Oh my God.
With my family.
What the fuck life do you live?
Just looked up what that is. I literally this week I looked up what is a
like a one-bedroom apartment just to sleep in on Friday night.
Yeah, a small apartment that I can go to and like see theater and use when I go to town and see
meet men. Let's be honest.
That's basically what it is.
No, Perez Hilton. This is apropos of nothing, but Perez Hilton lives in an apartment in New York and has a separate one in the same building that he just uses to hook up with guys.
Where is he getting money? Where is he getting money?
Yeah, right. Good.
I don't know.
Fuck him.
What would your aunt say?
Brent, what would your Aunt Ramona say about something she heard on today's show?
I was in the bedroom and bibbity bobbity boop. Your Uncle Hamilton sprained his back.
My Hamilton and Ramona. What a cut that those names. Oh my God. My Aunt Joanne would likely say, Ernest Borgnine isn't so hard to look at. It's not so hard on the eyes.
Easy on the eyes, just
He's
like
easy
your
on the
dad,
eyes.
Larry.
That's right. How about Aunt Anne?
My Aunt Anne would say, I don't think they should be taking medical services away from anyone. In fact, I think they should be given medical services. I could use some Botox, maybe a lift.
Well, thanks for listening. I'm Elliot Glazer.
I am Brent Sullivan.
And I am H. Allen Scott.